everybody, and welcome. We are so glad that you're gathered here with us this morning. If you are with us online, we're grateful that you are continuing to make use of this technology that is allowing us to gather together in a different way during this new season. And we'd love to know that you're watching with us, so be sure to drop a line in the comments on Facebook or in the chat if you're on the live stream, and let us know that you're watching and where you're watching from. And if you're here with us in person at the Hub, it's so good to see you, and we are glad that you're here this morning. And we just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who have been so gracious and flexible as we are all kind of practicing these new guidelines and figuring out what it means to move into this new season and gather together in a way that is safe and mindful, so everybody feels comfortable meeting here, with putting on masks as we come inside and moving around the building, as well as having masks on while we're singing and being spaced out with physical distance in the room. And that also includes RSVPing online. So we want to thank you again for continuing that practice. We know it's an extra step, but for the foreseeable future, we will ask that you sign up in advance before coming to a gathering so that we can make sure that there's plenty of room for everyone. So we do have, if you're here in person this morning and know that you're going to want to continue to meet with us here at the Hub, or if you're online and you're watching and think maybe you'd like to try it, we have multiple dates available that you can sign up for in advance on the website. So at any time, you can head on over to wm.church/RSVP and sign up for a Sunday gathering. While you're there on the website, as always, you can worship God through giving, as well as taking advantage of the giving stations that are here in the room in person. And there on our website as well, you can stay up to date on all the latest information and things happening around Watermark. So be sure to check out wm.church. And we know that this is a season where some of this repetition of these guidelines and practices and things that we have to be mindful of, that it can get a little bit old. It can feel tiresome to talk about it all the time, and it can feel tiresome to hear it all the time. So we're thankful for you as hanging with us with flexibility and patience as we're all kind of getting used to these new rhythms and practices. But we know that sometimes it can start to feel a little bit heavy when it just feels like a lot of serious talk happening all the time. And so today we wanted to switch things up a little bit and do something to kind of lighten the mood. And so we have our very own resident games master, the legendary Brad Zimmerman, who's going to join us on stage and lead an activity this morning.
Awesome. Well, welcome this morning, and as Laura said before, for everyone online, make sure you join in the chat because we would love for you to participate in this just as well as everybody here in the room at the Hub. And so we are going to be playing a little game together, and this game is called Streaming or Not, okay? And you're going to decide whether or not a description of a show or a movie that I read, is that a real show or movie that you could stream online right now, or is this totally made up? So if you're watching online, what you'll do is you'll put in like the word streaming, or even guess the title if you think the title, you know the title of the show, and throw that in the chat every time you think you know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, or if you think it's a fake show, you can just put fake, in the chat there. For everyone in the room, we're going to get a little bit more physical with it. So we're going to stand up, and you're going to stand tall and proud if you think the answer is true. And if you think it's wrong, you're going to sit down. Okay, so we're going to start with everybody standing. So if everybody can get up if they're able to, that would be awesome. And I'm going to read our first description. And if you think it's right, stay standing. If you think it's wrong, sit down. Okay. This docuseries follows the lives and stories of a paper company. Is that a real show or a fake show? This docuseries follows the lives and stories of employees of a paper company. Okay, most of the people at the Hub here are standing. Some of you guys sat down. That show is The Office. So if you're standing, you are right. Okay, that show is The Office. Okay, so now maybe you understand. So everybody stand back up if you sat down. Online, make sure you're engaging in that chat. Okay, this next one. Two sisters and their friends travel to an ancient autumn-bound forest of an enchanted land. They set out to find the origin of the queen's powers in order to save their kingdom. Do we think that is a real show, or do we think that's fake? Is that something that you can stream right now or not? Again, we're hitting about maybe 50-50. More people are standing for this one. If you're standing, you're right. That's the plot for Frozen 2. Frozen 2. Two sisters, Anna and Elsa, and their friends Olaf and Sven. They set out on an adventure to find out the source of Elsa's powers. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Okay, stand back on up. Okay, this next one. is a reality show. This reality show follows couples as they meet for the very first time when they say, "I do" on their wedding day. Is this a real show that you can watch streaming right now, or is this fake? Everyone in the room basically is standing right now, and you're all right, because that is Married at First Sight. I will say I've only watched like 3 or 4 minutes of this show, but when I watched it, this guy they were like showing the couple before they met, and I was like, that guy's not staying with that girl. Guess what? I was right. He didn't stay with her. It didn't last. I should be a matchmaker, maybe. Probably not. Probably not a good idea. Okay, this next one is two sisters, Tia and Tamara, try to find love and navigate the new world of Zoom dating while stuck in quarantine. Two sisters, Tia and Tamara, try to find love and navigate the new world of Zoom dating while stuck in quarantine. Is this a real show or is this a fake show? Most people sat down. We got a few stragglers who are standing. If you sat down, you're right. That's totally made up. But, so that's not streaming. But if you recognize those names, Tia and Tamara, that's because they're from Sister Sister. Do you guys remember that show? Sister, Sister. Yeah. Okay, anyway, let's stand back on up. We got a few more of these. Okay, this next one, this movie. Sam learns that the second born in royal families have superpowers and are tasked with saving the world. Is this a real movie or is this a made-up movie? The second born in royal families have superpowers and are tasked with saving the world. We're at about 50% in here in person. Hopefully online, you guys are in the chat, leaving your responses there. If you thought that was true, you are right. The name of that movie is The Secret Society of the Second Born Royals. The shortest movie title I've ever come across. I mean, it's definitely not a mouthful at all. So there you go. Okay, we got, I think, 3 more here. Stand back on up. Okay. This reality show follows Summer on her latest forage-to-table adventures in eventful trips in Colorado, Vermont, and Wyoming, where she prepares all vegan dishes. So follow Summer in her latest forage-to-table adventures in eventful trips to Colorado, Vermont, and Wyoming as she prepares all vegan dishes. A lot of people are sitting down, and those people must know that this is not true. That's an altered plot line for a different show called Meat Eater, where a guy travels to places like Texas and kills a lot of animals and only makes meat-based dishes instead of vegetable-based dishes. So, okay, stand on up. We got 2 more. Final 2 here. Poppy and Branch discover they are but one of 6 different tribes scattered over 6 different lands, devoted to 6 different types of music: funk, country, techno, classical, pop, and rock. Their world is about to get a whole lot louder. Is that a real movie or a fake one? We got like most people in the room are standing. We got a few that sat down. If you're standing, you're right. That's the plot line to Trolls World Tour, which was one of the first movies that couldn't go into theaters because of quarantine and went straight streaming online. Okay, here is our last and final show description. This real-life drama features a former presidential candidate who is caught up in a murder-for-hire scandal involving a business rival. This real-life drama features a former presidential candidate who is caught up in a murder-for-hire scandal involving a business rival. Now, here at the Hub, we're looking like most people think this isn't true. We got a few that are standing proud. Let's see what online's saying. This is the true story of Tiger King, who not only ran for president, he ran for governor. He is in jail right now for a murder-for-hire thing with Carol Baskins, who's actually right now on Dancing with the Stars. This is the craziest world we live in right now, people. It's just, we are on an alternate timeline, I'm sure, somehow. Thank you guys so much for playing. You guys can grab a seat. Thanks so much for doing that, yes. Again, we just want to have a little fun this morning. And earlier, Laura mentioned that you can find a bunch of stuff on wm.church that we're doing around Watermark, but sometimes we can't really show you all of what's happening. So we wanted to give you a sneak peek and look into something that just recently happened. So check this out.
Hey everyone, I'm super excited to show you the work that has started on a project 2 years in the making. We have saved up to remodel and renovate our kids' rooms here at the Hub, and this weekend we had an awesome crew come out and get this project started. We can't wait to see it finished and invite our kids back into these spaces. Once this room is completed, we will be ready to resume Surf City on Sunday mornings, but we need your help. It takes 6 adult or student leaders to hang out with your kids and to help them take steps towards Jesus. So if you are already a part of our indoor gatherings or you feel comfortable coming back inside the Hub, we need your help to make this possible. There really is no Surf City without you and your investment. You can let me know that you're interested by going to wm.church/next. We would also love to bring back coffee and drinks to our in-person gatherings, but currently most of that team is greeting at our doors and helping us safely engage. If we could get 10 more greeters, that would free up our hospitality team to serve coffee and drinks again. We can't do this alone. So take a step back in by serving with our kids or greeting at wm.church/next. We need each other during this season, and we can't wait to see what God does in and through us.
All right, it's good to see you already on your mobile devices signing up. That's great, way to go, so proud of you. I can see you at home already, signing up, good job. While you're at it, I've got a little quiz show myself. I got inspired by Brad's, so I thought I would throw this out. Let's see if you guys can name any anti-heroes, okay? So in the chat, or even right now in a second, I'll have you name some anti-heroes. But first of all, I have to ask, does anybody actually know, by show of hands, what an anti-hero is? Okay, there's 3 of us. Good. So I had to look it up too, but the way I look things up is I asked my wife if she knows first, and then she looks it up for me. Not usually, but in this instance she did. And here was, of course, like probably the first thing that came up in her Google search. I'm going to read it to you. Anti-hero is a narrative protagonist who is defined by their own self-interest. They often feel rejected by society and they veer down a self-destructive path that results in isolation and death. More often than not, anti-heroes are destined to fail and become destitute in the lowest pits of loneliness. Sounds like a great show, right? Good book, must read. But we actually have these kind of anti-hero characters all around as the central character to a lot of things we read. Did you guys think of any or watch? Go ahead, shout one out if you got one. Give you a hint. The Office has one. Deadpool is an anti-hero. Nicely done from the Marvel Universe. Wolverine is also among them, the anti-hero. Michael Scott is who I was looking for from The Office. I wrote down some, so you guys will save you. But please, in the chat, I hope you're adding them to your chat. So Jack Sparrow is one of my favorite anti-heroes. House, these are a couple, I just looked them up online, so I haven't seen all of these shows. Dr. House, Walter White from Breaking Bad, Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby, John Wick, and my new favorite anti-hero, because I am a child of the 80s. I was actually born in the 70s, but 80s was just a fantastic decade. If you missed it, sorry about that. But we just binge watched Cobra Kai. Yeah, Johnny Lawrence. He was the bad guy in Karate Kid. Now the whole show pretty much revolves around him as kind of an anti-hero. But with an anti-hero theme, you begin to kind of get the backstory and you understand why they're the person that you really don't want to root for, but you kind of have a lot of empathy for. And then you start to realize that you see yourself in that person. And that's exactly what we have with the book of Jonah and with the character of Jonah, the person of Jonah, the prophet of Jonah, who everybody, the original office, man, can't get words today. It's going to be a long one. The original audience could completely see themselves in Jonah. Jewish prophet who, like, we expect him to do the right thing every time, and time after time after time, he completely chooses what not a prophet would do. And yet you have empathy for him, because why? I wouldn't want to go to Nineveh either. Like, those people are terrible. We hate them. Why would we go there and have God give them a chance? Plus, it ruins potentially Jonah's career choice of prophet. And so you can relate to him a little bit. And we're shocked then by his behavior. And hopefully then, even across time, centuries of time, even across cultural differences, we, as we've been able to read through and engage in the book of Jonah, can not only empathize with him, but we start to see ourselves in him. And there's a little bit of a mirror held up. So we're going to read the second chapter of Noah, but it actually starts with the last verse of chapter 1. So you can follow along with me, and I'll make some comments as we go. Last week, we had left Jonah, to give you the series recap. He was on the boat, but the sailors threw him overboard. The storm stopped, and we just left Jonah treading water. So here we go. Jonah chapter 1, verse 17. Now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah. And I can't go beyond that, because normally we think of a whale, because I think it's the largest seafaring animal that we could imagine ingesting a human being, somebody the size of a human being. So this is a phrase that didn't make sense. But anyways, that type of size animal. And yet, the way that the great fish is described is meant to help the original readers juxtapose what they see, not as necessarily a specific seafaring animal, but as exactly the opposite of what the surrounding nations would have understood by that animal. Okay, so you're like, okay, you're losing me, Tom. So help me catch up. Okay, so let me go to the Greek translation of the Hebrew version. So this was originally written in Hebrew. And the Jews decided to translate that Hebrew Bible into Greek around 100, 200 years before Jesus, because that was the dominant language of the time, and they didn't want anybody to miss out on their Bible reading, so let's translate it into the language that we're all speaking. And in that language, the great fish was translated as this Greek word katos, which actually means monster or sea creature. And it's actually the word that Jesus used when he was recounting this story, because that's the scripture that he read, but also because there was this concept that the sea was this place of foreboding and evil, and all of the surrounding nations to Israel would have feared the sea, and the sea monster specifically, because it is kind of a personification of evil, and also came to be equated with a god who lived in the sea that you also didn't tangle with. You just didn't mess with it. And so that was the common understanding of what a sea monster was, or what the sea monster was. And then now in the Hebrew scriptures, as Jonah encountered this great fish or this sea monster, now it wasn't a god to be feared or an unfathomable circumstance that you had to deal with, but it was part of God's created order. And God was still God over all of creation, and he could utilize anything from the sweetest little land animal to the big bad sea monster to accomplish his will. All powers, no matter how evil, would submit to how God wanted to orchestrate and utilize them in God's created universe. And it makes a huge difference. So sorry, there you go. Big explanation right after the first sentence. We'll get a little bit more in. And Jonah was inside that fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Well, that sounds familiar. I'll come back to that. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from inside the fish. Well, I mean, of course he did. Who wouldn't? He said, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me. You threw me into the ocean depths. And you're like, hold up. Now, who threw Jonah into the ocean depths? Do you guys remember from last week? It says the sailors hurled him overboard, and they're like, hey, I hope your God's not offended, but you told me to. So Jonah's saying, The Lord threw him over. The two can be indistinguishable at times, and it's not a problem in Hebrew culture. We'll get into that in just a second. And I sank down to the heart of the sea. The mighty waters engulfed me. I was buried beneath your wild and stormy waves. So basically, he's treading water. He's trying to make it, but he's slowly sinking. Slowly, the waves are starting to overtake him. He's losing his strength, and pretty soon he's going to go under. But what you need to understand is almost every phrase of this prayerful poem is a hyperlink to someplace else in the Bible, usually in the Psalms. You're like, what is a hyperlink? It's like the old school word that we just used for links. You go to a Wikipedia page and look up anything, and it's gonna have a bunch of links to other information or sources that will give you more context for the stuff that you're reading on. And so the person who wrote all of this down, Jonah's prayer poem, wants the readers to follow these hyperlinks to the other places in Scripture. And it's absolutely amazing because what you discover when you do that is not only is this a greatest hits of all of the watery metaphors in Psalms, but it turns out it's exactly the opposite and an ironic opposite, because that which the psalm writers declare God has rescued us out from or asks the Lord to rescue us out from, Jonah succumbs to almost willingly. So the whole picture becomes pretty ironic for this anti-hero. Then I said, "O Lord, you have driven me from your presence." Again, I'm pretty sure it was Jonah that ran, but okay. "Yet I will look once more toward your holy temple. I sank beneath the waves, and the waters closed over me." He started to sink so far, seaweed wrapped itself around my head. "I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates lock forever." So it's interesting at this point that he's trapped in the realm and in the world of death, even as his breath is escaping him. The place that nobody ever wants to go to. And the Hebrew people actually, they referred to the place of the death, of the realm of the dead, as Sheol. And they didn't have a concept of what comes after death. We wouldn't get a concept of heaven or hell until Jesus comes on the scene and starts to expand some of that. But right here, all we have is this pit, this grave imagery that humans are not supposed to go to, but we all eventually end up there anyways. And we cry out to God that he rescues us from there. And yet for most of us, or for all of us, that is ultimately our end. And Jonah is resigning himself while crying out to the Lord. But, O Lord, my God, you snatched me from the jaws of death. As my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods or idols turn their backs on all God's mercies or God's covenant-loving grace. But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. He speaks true words while at the same time basically bartering with God. God, if you get me out of this, I'll go back to the temple and I'll do the right thing. I swear, I promise, if you just get me out of this situation. Does that sound like anything that we probably try to do on a pretty regular basis when we find ourselves in the inescapable, in a situation that we can no longer manipulate, we can no longer manage it. We can't get out of it even though we got ourselves into it. The irony, the precious irony of this statement is his observation that he, the good guy, the right guy, the guy who knows God personally, is going to sing praises, offer thanksgiving, praises, sacrifices of praise and thanksgiving at the temple. He will make vows. But who is it that just in the previous chapter was the ones singing, sacrificing, and making vows? Oh, it was the pagan idolaters. And once again, the guy who should know it all, the guy who should do the right thing, is juxtaposed against the ones who actually are rescued, who are sailing free and clear, and now worship this God that they never knew before. Jonah should have known better. Then the Lord ordered the fish to spit Jonah out on the beach. There you go. That's how that chapter ends. Then God spoke, and the puke a guy right there. Can you imagine if there were witnesses? Come on, if we had had cameras, that would have been amazing. So I'd love to lead us in a meditation at this point. Just think through what it would be like to be inside a fish, all warm and snuggly and no oxygen. I'm just kidding. We are going to do a meditation here, but it's not on that. Like, I was just thinking that's absolutely the worst. The guy, he gets a second chance, and we'll find out next week what he does with that second chance, but he's certainly worse for wear. Certainly bleached out and smelling like death, warmed over probably. But he's faced with a choice now because God has rescued him. So here are some observations that I would like us to meditate on, just a couple. God arranged for the fish. I think we have this narrative that we tell ourselves that usually when bad things happen, especially when bad things happen to good people, it's because evil is at work and having its way, and there's deliverance that's needed. But in the biblical stories, yes, evil is real and is wreaking havoc, but it's always subservient to God's ultimate purpose and causes, and can never escape God's watchful eye or useful hand, because he never misses out on an opportunity to help us grow and learn and reach life. And so for the Hebrew people, there was no inconsistency with seeing God's agency, God at work behind throwing a storm at the ship, a brutal storm, behind throwing Jonah into the water, behind Jonah getting swallowed to add insult to injury. He's going to die at the bottom of the ocean, but no, now he's got to become fish food. How absolutely humiliating. And we're going to find out that God even uses some other things like a gourd and a worm in chapter 4, but we'll get there because God is orchestrating everything ultimately for his purposes, wanting to offer each and every one of us a turning point. And so we tend to think, how could a good, loving God use potentially evil or natural disasters to bring about good things? And yet that's precisely what he's determined to do. And it's not like some crazy abusive spouse gaslighting somebody else and just trying to make us believe one thing. No, this is a God who time after time, even Jonah admits it, your inescapable loving kindness, your love pursues us. You are always faithful. God's heart is never questioned. The question becomes, what are we going to do when his reckless love looks a lot like something that consumes us and even kill us? So I'd love for us to think about that. And even, I mentioned links in this, hyperlinks, the little clickable things. And honestly, like this chapter, every other word would be blue and underlined as some place to go. But there was one spot that this prayer poem took me to Hosea that I'm pretty sure the author would not want us to miss out on. And so I'd love for us to catch what Hosea chapter 5, verses 13 through 15 say. When Israel and Judah, so this is another prophet, by the way, Hosea, but different place, different time, different setting. But this is what God is saying through the prophet Hosea. When Israel and Judah saw how sick they were, Israel turned to Assyria, to the great king there, but he could neither help nor cure them. When they were in trouble, when they needed rescue from another powerful enemy or they needed assistance financially, they looked to the regional ruling power, superpower, for help. But God is saying Assyria is not going to help you. The irony we know from the book of Jonah and from other books is that they are the beast that would eventually swallow Israel. And they would have to come to grips with what it looks like to live in the belly of the beast, the one they cried out to for help. They cried out to the wrong God. This is God speaking, I will be like a lion to Israel, like a strong young lion to Judah. I will tear them to pieces. I will carry them off, and no one will be left to rescue them. Again, this was Assyria that carried them off. God is taking credit for it because he wants to utilize this in their lives if they let him. Then I will return to my place until they admit their guilt and they turn. They return They take that turning point on. For as soon as trouble comes, they will earnestly search for me. So Jonah is not at all surprised by where he's landed because of his decisions. And he's actually almost welcoming the death, the out that this gives him. So the question that I would ask of us is the surroundings that we find ourselves in, the hard ones, the difficult ones, the ones that cause us frustration and anger and angst and an inability to control or to work our way out of, could it be that God is wanting to get our attention and present us with a turning point? What if 2020 and COVID and all this other garbage that has happened this year has been more than just a really bad year? I find it interesting, actually, that throughout the course of history that I know of, and I can't speak definitively on this, I guess, but what I've observed is that time after time when there's been a breakout, a plague, or as we call it, a pandemic, it's been seen as God's judgment, as God presenting us with a turning point. And keep in mind that for Israel, judgment, it could lead to death, but it also could lead to life if we or people submit to and allow God to strip away that which is dragging us down and tearing us apart. But it's going to be the hard road. It's going to be a painful road. And so often it becomes the road less traveled. But what if God's judgment from a good father looks a lot like a God trying to rescue us with something that could potentially kill us? So I would ask that we possibly consider and meditate on our year this far. Where are you at right now? Is God possibly trying to get you and your attention? Is God possibly saying, hey, there's another chance, there's another path, there's another possible way out here? So that's the one thing I want us to consider. And then as a result of that, I'd like us to consider that Jonah was completely blind to the idols that he had served. Tim Mackey, the guy who, if you're familiar with the Bible Project, said it this way. Jonah sees the literal idols that the pagans worship, but doesn't see the more subtle idols in his own life that keep him from fully grasping that he too, just like the heathen, lives only equally by God's grace. And I think one of the biggest clues to finding out what that little subtle idol was for Jonah was where he tried to run to. See, Tarshish was this amazing place on the south side of Spain. Very much tropical weather where all people are nicely bronzed. I would imagine if they had pools, they were sitting by them with cocktails. And there was wealth and there was good things. It was the good life. And Jonah wanted to get there because where God was asking him to go was Nineveh, the very heart of Assyria. And we're thinking, are you kidding me? Why would I want to go to Russia? Why would I want to travel into the pit of despair in communist China? Why would I want to endanger my life in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia? Or pick your Muslim country that you feel like we might be enemies with. No, I would rather buy the first class ticket to Hawaii, right? And take a nice, easy plane ride to get there. We can identify with Jonah's impulse to run, but his idol was his own desire to be comfortable and to not have his reputation wrecked, because we know God is going to probably be merciful if they show the slightest hint of turning. And then that knocks at my credibility. I look stupid. And plus, they don't deserve it. They're evil people. They need to burn. They need to burn. I will like to enjoy it from Hawaii, please. And we can relate possibly with this idol. Again, Tim Mackey says, his idolatry is not a golden calf. It's his vision of the good life that doesn't include God's authority over him. It's really nice when we can have God along for the ride and we can carry him around in the co-pilot seat. But ultimately, his directions are just suggestions. And I got the wheel and I got this. and I see a better future ahead for me. And this is where I think that when we're faced with a season like this one that we're in, like 2020, in this awful year, we'd all rather just smack the button to get out of here. When's it going to get back to normal? How soon can we do the things that we're so used to doing? And we might miss out that God is highlighting an idol for us. Maybe it's an idol of comfort, like Jonah's was. Maybe it's an idol of something else that we've held tightly to, but we didn't even realize how tightly we were holding onto it. I've had the privilege of talking with a lot of watermarkers, obviously, but it's been interesting to hear some people and how they have dealt with all of the garbage that's going on and the hardships that we're facing. One actually predates 2020, but hopefully you got a chance to hear when Bob Johnson shared, I don't know, 4 weeks ago or whatever. Go back, you can check it out, watch it online if you missed it. Bob Johnson sharing about how he was basically drinking himself into a place where he had absolutely nobody else around him but his daughter. And then he got a letter from the one person who was still able to hang out with him saying, if things don't change, you won't have me. It was a turning point moment where he realized that the last thing he wanted was the very thing he was getting. He was all alone. And although he didn't think he was a drunk or had a problem with drinking, he decided to reach out for community. He decided to reach out for the thing that would give him life. But he didn't have to. It was a turning point moment. Or another watermarker that I was talking to who had so many good things going on, God things, ministry opportunities, serving people, taking care of needs, helping so many people, all for God. And then it was all stripped away in a moment, and they were left with themselves. And all of a sudden had this realization, who was I doing all of that for? Felt like their identity was being shaped by trying to get other people's approval or doing good things and getting God's attention. When in fact God was saying, you can just sit still and I love you and you are wonderful and beautiful and fearfully made. And so now coming out of this season, being able to give generously and serve as God opens doors has been freeing and life-giving for this person. Or what about the couple that had life very comfortable coming into this year, looking forward to another fantastic year, but then when the quarantine hits, finding ourselves as a couple, they were finding themselves struggling with kids at home, with not able to go anywhere, with tensions in the marriage. And they were faced with the turning point, and they sought help, and they sought new habits that would bring health and life and exercise and fresh air. Or one other watermarker who was reading The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry during the COVID quarantine, which is a new book out, highly recommend it, felt like their phone, as a result of reading this book, was the thing that was dominating their thought world, how they were perceiving the world, and even just taking so much time. And so they've stopped, for the most part, taking the phone into the bathroom. You're like, really? I know, you all do it, come on. It's the best place to play games. Leaving it on the counter, walking away from it. I know I've got a little bit of nervousness because my phone's right over there. And we attach ourselves to these things. And social media becomes such a filter through which our feelings are poured through. And to take a step back and find life outside in a different perspective. So, for the rest of our time this morning, I'd love for us to again consider, has God prepared this fish for us? And is he pointing out some potential idols that we didn't even know we had? And we're taking his place when he's got something so much better, that he's offering life on the other side of this fish. So, how is God getting your attention right now? As we close out by singing a song, we're going to sing a couple songs, but this next song, I'd love for us to just ask God. And we believe that God still speaks, by the way. Very rarely ever in a huge audible voice. So it may be a thought, it may be a picture, it may be an impression that you just get in your heart. Those are promptings that the Holy Spirit gives. Is he potentially pointing something out to you today that he's asking you to let go of? It's a boat that you put all your hope in, and he's asking you to step off from it. Here's a couple of ideas just to get things churning in your head. None of these may relate to you, but maybe it's helpful for you. Based on Jonah's life, I'd like to suggest that God is asking us possibly to not make some of his mistakes. Is he possibly calling us to slow down and stop running to where it's comfortable and sunny? This is what I tend to do all the time. Is he possibly waking us up, shaking us awake from our attempt to just hibernate in the bottom of the boat until it all just blows over and then we can resurface? Is he possibly throwing us a flotation device that is an offer of rescue from our entrenched nationalism or our tendency to group people into friend or foe, good or bad, us or them? Is he possibly preparing a great fish to help us die to our addiction to perfectly good things and to our habits of self-comforting? So, as we listen to Christine sing this song again, be listening to what God might be pointing out to you. Ask him, God, is there something that I'm not seeing that you'd like to pull me out of and free me from? Here's just a couple of questions to get you going. As a way of leaning into your faith, as a way of leaning into your faith family, it might be great. You can comment on this. Get into the chat online, whether you're here or at home. Get into the chat, and we'll find resonance with people who share some of the similar journeys, similar hang-ups. Ask God to identify any things that you've been pursuing that have taken his place in your life. Ask God what he's wanting to pull away from you to free you. Check inside. Have you been frustrated, hurting, alone, angry, worried, fearful, just wanting to escape? Then ask God to reveal what's at the source of those feelings and to give you his perspective on what you should do with them and how you should view them. So, Holy Spirit, we ask that you'd speak to each and every one of us individual right now. Speak clearly. Get our attention. We're listening.
Here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all, surrendering all. Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near, desperate for you, desperate for you. I surrender. Drench my soul as mercy and grace unfold. I hunger and thirst. I hunger and thirst. With arms stretched stretched wide. I know you hear my cry. Speak to me now. Lord, speak to me now. I surrender. I surrender. I wanna know you more. I wanna know you more. I surrender. I surrender. I wanna know you more. I wanna know you more.
As God has hopefully been giving you some ideas, some thoughts, and you may not even know that it's God or recognize that it's God putting those things in your mind and heart. The next question I'd love for you to ask is, okay, what do you want me to do with this? I feel like this is true. I feel like you're showing this to me. I feel like it's definitely a blind spot. Now, what's one practical step I can take to be free of this or to change the outcome of this? The Holy Spirit is speaking. If you're not hearing him, don't beat yourself up. It's not that he doesn't care or love you. It's not even that you've done something wrong and so you can never hear God. It takes time. But we're going to provide time and listen for now what God's next steps might be out of the things he'd like to lift off from you.
Like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a rushing wind, Jesus, breathe within. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. Like a mighty storm, stir within my soul. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in me. I surrender. I surrender. I wanna know you more. I wanna know you more. I surrender. We're gonna
close out with one final song, but I wanted to follow up on a promise I made to you that we'd talk about what's up with the 3 days and 3 nights, because this is actually a pretty common theme throughout Hebrew scriptures. And typically it's a thing that happens to individuals when they go on a journey that nearly always takes them near, if not into death. And you'll see it time and time again. Look up 3 days and 3 nights or on the 3rd day. Those words will take you to stories throughout. But the beautiful thing is that Jonah begins to point forward to another 3 days or on the 3rd day moment. And the thing is, hundreds of years before, God was calling his shot. In, again, the book of Hosea, I read to you how he was going to allow them to be taken into the belly of Assyria and just be crushed there and processed there. But right after chapter 5 comes chapter 6, when Hosea says this, or God through Hosea says this: "Come, let us return to the Lord. He has torn us to pieces, but now he will heal us. He has injured us, and now he will bandage our wounds. In a short time, he will restore us so that we may live in his presence." Here's the interesting thing. This is my favorite translation, New Living Translation, but it doesn't do us a service of catching out some of these finer details, these nuances in here. So I'll read it out of the Contemporary Jewish Bible that's a more literal translation. "Come, let us return to Adonai, for he has torn us and he will heal us. He has struck us and he will bind our wounds. After 2 days, he will revive us. On the 3rd day, he will raise us up, and we will live in his presence. He will respond to us as surely as the arrival of the dawn, of the coming of rains in early spring." Do you get the sense that the tomb can become a womb, that the place of death could be potentially life-giving? It's a turning point that all we have to do is say yes to. And Jesus has said, "I will go first." And he became the first fruits of all who would be resurrected. And that same Spirit who resurrected Jesus now is available and living in us. And we can have life in the midst of death, life in the midst of being able to throw off idols. And so I'd love for you to stand up and mask up as we sing about Jesus and his resurrection that he's offering to each of us today.
The head that once was crowned with thorns is crowned with glory now. The Savior now to wash our feet. Now at his feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that held us now gives way to him who is our peace. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave. Our God has robbed the grave. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. The resurrected King is resurrecting me.
Amen. What a powerful and amazing truth for us to remember together this morning, that we worship a God who is alive and who gives us life as well. So good to be with all of you this morning. Just as a reminder, if you would like to join us here in person in a future week, head on over to wm.church/RSVP and sign up. We would love to see you there. Thanks for being here with us this morning, and have a great week.